Hello, my sunshines, and welcome to your session with me, Dr. Deborah Brown. And we are talking today about relationships. And this is a part of our Catalyst series, our short season where we're going to be working on some action items to actually change some things in your life and make it a little bit better. So today we're talking about relationships. Are they harmonious? Are they harmful? And what we're really looking at is, are you making the most of what's around you? Or is what's around you taking from you? So today we're going to talk about all kinds of relationships, and relationships are everywhere. We have them at work, we have family, we have friends, and we have partners. And there are so many different types of relationships that a lot of what we're going to talk about today can apply to almost all of those. And then we'll talk about some specific things related to partnering relationships as well. So, what I'm asking you to do is kind of do an inventory and look at your life and look at the people that are in it and say, how are we doing? Are my relationships harmonious mostly? Or do I have relationships in my life that are harmful or just kind of negative? So I'm asking you to think about that as we're talking and as we're giving examples and ideas. I want you to relate it to anybody in your life right now who feels very stressful to you, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today can really help eliminate some of the stress that we have around relationships, which is really what we want. We want harmony. It's not always going to be harmonious, but we want it harmonious most of the time. So I want you doing that little inventory and thinking about, in your life, where is your stress and how much of it is in your relationships. So some people might say that it's the meaning of life to connect to people. And a lot of us have seen that stuff on Instagram where we're talking to 90-plus-year-old people and they're saying that their most important life lesson was that their connection was important, that they wished that they had spent more time with people or had been a better parent or a better friend or a better husband or wife or partner. And that regret does tell us something. It tells us that they've figured something out and that maybe we should listen to it. And I believe it. I believe that a lot of the meaning that we get from life is about the connection that we have and the experiences we have with the people that we're connected to. And that maybe the purpose of life is to find those people and to operate in a place with those people that's honest and peaceful and that makes your life better. And I've learned that a lot later in life. I think it took me to be, almost the past 5 years to really begin to realize the power of those connections and how important that was to everything else that I did. I was always very career focused and always very educationally focused. And I've begun realizing over the past decade, maybe, that without the people, those things are meaningless. And the relationship to those people is where I find most of my joy. So I want you to think about that. Is your joy coming from your career, or is it coming from the people in your life, or from other things? And it's okay. There's no right answer. But I think what we'll find is there's another side of that, which is pain. And where's your pain coming from? And I know from, therapy, a lot of times people come in with relationship problems. It's probably the single biggest thing is some sort of relationship problem. Now, of course, people come in for the relationship with themselves and they want to work on that. And we always want to work on that. That's what we do in most of our episodes. But this one is going to be a little bit of working on yourself and a little bit of looking at these relationships with other people. So when people come to therapy, some of the biggest pain is in a breakup from a partner or an estrangement from a family member or a conflict that they can't resolve. So do you see the power of having non-harmonious relationships? It can just be in you every single day and pull you down. And there's enough in the world that's hard. There's enough that's hard about what we have to do. Our relationships should mostly be the soft place that we land, not the place where it gets harder. Nobody wants to fight through work all day and then come home and have to fight through life in their home. And if that's what you're doing, then I want you to listen to some of the things that we're talking about here, because there's some fights that we should be able to win. And relationships are one of them. So the problem with relationships overall is that some of the worst trauma that people have does come from the people that are supposed to love them. One of the toughest things that we get through when we work on trauma in therapy is the idea that somebody that was supposed to care about your needs and emotionally be kind to you was not. And that's why we have mother wounds and father wounds a lot of the time, is that our parents are supposed to be our biggest cheerleaders and love us the most. And sometimes they're the people that can inflict the most damage. Our partner that we share our home with and our children with are people sometimes that can inflict the most damage. And our friendships. Some of us have years-long friendships with people that are not good for us. So to understand trauma, we don't really need to understand what happened entirely. Sometimes that's part of it. But what we mostly have to understand is the wound that it leaves and the way it shaped our identity. So a lot of relationship trauma shapes us in ways that we go into new relationships still with a wound. So what I want us to think about here is that we have a human need to be in relationships, but we also have a human need for safety and security. So if you have been traumatized and you have wounds, your ability to trust is going to be impaired sometimes. And your sense of safety and security might mean doing more on your own. And I think there are people that are oriented that way. There are people that are very interested in their own processing and their own working through things in their own head. But there are more of us, I think, in my experience, that really rely on other people to help us to do that. And there's no right or wrong answer there. I always tell you in almost every episode, we talk about how sharing things with other people sometimes helps our growth. But if you've been wounded by other people, you're not going to be real quick to do that. So a relationship is a give and a take over time where you develop trust. And let's talk about what is a healthy relationship. And I have a definition that I like to use where it says, a healthy relationship is a connection where you don't have to betray yourself. You don't have to negotiate your values, and you don't have to compromise your integrity. It's a place where the give and take balances, and our life is enriched by being with that person. Well, can you say that about all your relationships? I can say that about some of mine, but not all of them. And that brings about the question, can we have an imperfect relationship? Should we just throw away the people that don't give as much as we give or that don't understand us? And the answer is found in you. I always say that estrangement, which is the total absence of a relationship with someone, is always the last resort. And I have found in the generation now, we're seeing a lot more estrangement in therapy, where children are saying to adult parents, you're toxic to me and I'm out of here. And there are times when I think that might be necessary. But most of the time, estrangement isn't the answer. Estrangement is the answer when it's the only way to keep yourself safe. What really is the decision instead is, am I going to have an imperfect relationship with this person? And can I do that? And I think the answer is usually yes. But the way to do it is the hard part, right? I think a lot of us have people in our lives, like siblings or parents, who are not going to go away. And we don't want them to go away. But they aren't necessarily giving, and they might not really be making us feel better. And we're allowed to have imperfect relationships, but there's a way to have them so that they don't hurt you. And Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make us feel inferior without our consent. And I think that's really powerful, is that when you're a child and you're in a home with people who might be abusing you or harming you, there is no consent. You can't jump out of that most of the time. But I think as an adult, and we're all adults here, is that some of us give consent to things that we don't like. And by continuing to tolerate those things, we continue to give consent. And then we complain that we're unhappy. There's a theory that says that we fall in love with what feels like home. And that doesn't always work to our advantage. If you grew up in a home where someone was cold and distant and didn't affirm your emotions, when you meet someone and you're younger and maybe undeveloped, and they are also cold and don't validate your emotions, in a strange sense, that can feel like home. It can feel comfortable because you're used to it, even though it's not the thing you need and not the thing you want. And I've done that. I went from a home that was not supportive or kind into relationships that were not supportive or kind, because I thought that's just what love was. That's what I thought about the way people treated people. And I didn't know any better. I know better now. And most of us as adults know and can identify what we want our figurative home to feel like. And for many of us, it's very different than what we grew up with. So think about it this way. Some people say we have three parts of us, that we have our heart, our mind, our soul, right? And I don't know, it's definitely a philosophical point of view that you could say your brain or your mind is your intellect or your creativity or what makes you unique. Your heart is your emotions and your desires. And maybe your soul is your depth, your values, your purpose, what you believe. And we're all made up of those things, I believe. I do believe that we have pieces of that in us. And separating them out can be really helpful to kind of identify who you are. But not all of those parts are going to resonate with every relationship that you have. I know plenty of people who grow very different from their family of origin, that they do not share the same values around brain and heart and soul that their parents do. So their parents don't resonate with all parts of them, and they don't resonate with all parts of their parents, but they still have that relationship. So I want you to realize every relationship you have is not going to resonate with all three parts of you, but there are some that should. And my feeling is that a partner should resonate with all three of those things in you. And think about that. If you're dating someone or you have a partner, do you jive in your brain and in your mind? Do you jive in your emotions and your feelings? Do you connect in your soul and the things that you believe or want out of life? And that doesn't happen immediately, and it isn't discovered immediately. So think of it this way. You meet someone and you start dating them and you start liking them. And as you develop the relationship, what are you doing? You're finding out all those things about them. You ask them questions, you have experiences. This is why I think dating and getting to know someone is such an important part of a relationship. And people go on chemistry and they go on the fire and they go on the visuals. And then they end up with somebody who doesn't speak to their mind, their heart and their soul, but rather speaks to the surface things they thought they wanted. So when you think about your relationships, the people that you trust and the people that are closest to you typically do speak to those three parts of you. But you might have other people in your life who don't get all those parts. And guess what? That's okay. But they aren't your closest people necessarily. So sometimes we lose relationships when we figure this out. And I see it with a lot of coming out stories and a lot of people who, when they come out as a different sexuality than a parent, that the parent then thinks they're so different and feels disconnected, and the relationship can fall apart. And sometimes the best coming out stories are the ones where the parents say, I don't understand and I don't get it, but I'm going to love you anyway, right? That's the ideal situation, but that's not what we get a lot of the time. So we lose relationships sometimes because we figure these things out. And I want you to normalize the fact that losing relationships is a part of what we do. And this one, I have been amazed time and time again with people that come to therapy that are so devastated by the loss of a friendship or the loss of a partner. And after this breakup, they just mourn it for eons, for a lot of time. And I think that there's a level of grief that's normal, but I also think there's a point when you realize that we have to normalize that. Not everybody is going to be a fit, and there's sometimes a time to move on. And it's sad and it stinks and we don't love it, but it's very normal. Look back at some of the people you've broken up with or have broken up with you over the years and think, would you still want to be with them now? And a lot of us would go, no, of course not. And I think in the moment, we might have been really devastated by that breakup and went, this is the end of the world. This is the end of everything. But we went on to form other relationships and we learned something. So a lot of people talk about forgiveness, that you have to forgive people that have done bad things to you. And we've talked about that here in the podcast too before, about how forgiveness is a personal value and everybody has a different view of what that is. And some people, I think you don't have to forgive. I think that sometimes you can go on without forgiving. But I think there's a kind of forgiveness that's more about your own recovery. So if you have a breakup with someone and they were terrible to you and you're trying to recover and move on, you might grieve the loss of the relationship. But forgiveness for you just might mean going, I let them go. I let them go. And they're not in my life anymore. And what did I learn? And sometimes that's a forgiveness of yourself, to go, why did I do that? Why was I with that person? Well, you have to be able to forgive yourself there and say, I was in a place where that seemed like it made sense, but now I realize it doesn't anymore. So sometimes forgiveness is just saying, thank you for what you gave me and thank you for what I learned from this. But I'm done giving you the chance to teach me anything. And sometimes it can just be wishing them healing and wishing them good luck, right? And I know when I would date people and I was in the process of kind of just meeting a lot of people at a certain time in my life. And I remember what I would say when I realized they weren't for me. And what I would always say is good luck to you. I hope you find what you're looking for. And it felt very generous in my mind to be able to say, you're not for me, but that doesn't make you a bad person. And I just wish you well. And that was almost healing for me, because it wasn't that I had to feel guilty that they were the wrong person, right? Sometimes we lose relationships and we move them along, and that's normal and that's okay. So the key to that is, though, is you don't take them with you. You carry the learning, you carry the lesson, but the wound, you heal it, you let it get better, but you don't allow those experiences to prevent you from trying again or building trust again. So when you are coming out of a relationship, a lot of times that safety and security goes up way high. And it should. We have to protect ourselves from being hurt by others, but sometimes it goes too high and we develop this belief, and I've heard this belief and I've had this belief, where this person will control me. This person will hold us back. This person will prevent my full development from happening. And I hear that a lot in marriages. Interestingly enough, from women often, where they say, when I'm with this person, I can't be me. And they attribute it to the person. And of course, it starts with the other person, but it goes back to that, who's really in control. And the truth of it is that most of the time you are, and you've patterned yourself in a way to stay quiet and stay uncomfortable because you perceive that as safety and security. And this is why more and more women are getting divorced after 20 years of marriage or 30 years of marriage, is they go, well, I wasn't happy. Well, he prevented my development. And the truth is with a lot of these situations, if the woman had spoken up at year 2 or year 5, The relationship might have been able to be saved or developed, maybe. But what happens is they normalized a lot of things and ended up making it about the person who did it instead of them not standing in their power and making changes. And that is really easy to say after the fact. And I went through that myself. I was in a very long marriage. And at the end, it took me a while to realize that a lot of it was on me. Is that if I had spoken up, things would have been different. And you can't blame another person for falling into a pattern that you perpetuate sometimes. So if you're in a relationship, you are in charge. Always. You're both in charge. In any relationship, think of it as a circle with a line drawn down the middle. Half of it belongs to you and half of it belongs to them. And in every relationship we're in, that is the ideal. The ideal is that you walk in a room and you get half of the air. You take up half of the space. Now, there are relationships where this is inherently harder, maybe with parents, maybe with our children, maybe even with some of our friends, right? But in partnership, it's got to be that way and it has to be shared. And the thing I want you to remember is that you might have somebody who feels a bit oppressive, but that doesn't mean you still aren't in control and get half of the space. And you're in charge now. You're a grown-up. And sometimes there are financial factors and there are other factors that make us feel not as in control. And it's very easy to say, step up and say what you believe. But even if you can't do it now, I want you building up to it. Otherwise, you're going to perpetuate the same pattern and in 10 years be having the same sadness around it. So if a relationship is feeling bad to you right now, any relationship, don't automatically blame your feelings on them. They made me feel this way, right? It's one of the things we do in therapy. We'll say instead, listen to the feeling that you're feeling and what is it telling you? And is that feeling telling you that this relationship is harmful or that it could be harmonious, right? So when somebody comes in and says, I don't like the way that my partner makes me feel, the first thing I say as a therapist is label that feeling. What does that partner make you feel? And how much of that can we attribute to a change that you might be able to make so that that person doesn't perpetuate that behavior? Think about friendships. I hear this a lot in friendships where someone will say, I went out with my friend and she's just so successful and she's so fit and she has the perfect family. And every time I go out with her, I feel like I'm a mess, right? And I've had people say that to me. And it happens more than you think, where people are comparing themselves to friends. Well, we're the same age and look how far they are and look where I am. And as a result, you might feel that that relationship is harmful to you. You come home and you feel really bad about yourself. Do you feel bad about yourself because the friend made you feel that way? Or do you feel bad about yourself because you're doing all kinds of comparisons? And either way, it's typically fixable because all you would have to do is talk to that friend and say, sometimes when I'm with you, I'm so impressed by you. And sometimes it just makes me feel like I haven't come as far. And there might be something in that conversation that liberates that person too, to be able to give you feedback or to be able to be aware that you feel that way. But what do most of us do? We shrink away, we disappear, we ghost because we don't want to be near that discomfort when maybe that discomfort was in you all along. Now, if you have a friend who's bragging about their Mercedes and criticizing your life, that's different, but that's also something you would have to take control of. Last time you and I went out together, you made me feel very uncomfortable because you said some things about my career that weren't really nice. Can we talk about that? And people cringe at those kind of conversations. But one of the things that I have learned from life and from being a therapist is that most of us quit relationships when they don't meet our needs. And unmet needs is my number one reason why relationships are not harmonious. Somebody's needs are not being met. And I can't be around you because you make me feel something. And a lot of times, as in couples therapy, if we start there, it's not that hard to fix that. To be able to say, you don't meet my need for physical affection. Okay, let's work on that. You don't meet my need for affirmation. Okay, let's work on it. Unmet needs are sometimes not the deal breakers we think they are. So, a relationship basic need is that you're constantly healing and changing. Now, this is a tough pill for people to swallow who often have had long-term relationships in one way or another, is if you say, okay, well, I don't have a great relationship with my mother. I need to heal that relationship. Maybe you do and maybe you don't, but there has to be a decision in there. I'm going to accept the way that my mother is and the way that she's never going to change, and then I'm going to adapt myself. Or I'm going to heal the relationship. Now, keep in mind, you have a choice in most relationships, friends, family. You can choose heal it or leave it as it is and accept it. We don't have that choice with partners. With partners, you have to keep healing. And healing is a part of being in a relationship. And people don't want to talk about that. They think it's all supposed to be wine and roses and happy all the time. But every time something goes wrong in a relationship, you have to be able to heal it. I had a couple that came in and one of the partners was really upset because they had been accused of infidelity. And we talked about it and I wanted to understand the story. And what it was that the partner had scratches on their back. And the other partner said, I see scratches on your back. What have you been doing? And the partner was so taken aback by it and went, I don't know. I did it myself. I don't know what it is. And the other partner got so whipped into a frenzy about it that this person was cheating on them. And the truth of it is it was random. It was from a tag in the shirt. And it was the truth. But what the issue was in that moment was that one partner was not healed, that they had been cheated on before in a previous relationship, and they brought that wound into the relationship. So they were looking for a problem and waiting for it. And when they saw evidence, they acted as if the problem had happened. Now, what happened in that situation is it was a great way to start healing because we were able to talk through and say, why did you jump to that conclusion? And the other partner got to understand why that was such an easy conclusion to jump to. And it had nothing to do with them. It had to do with the other partner's experience. So do you see how now they brought that into awareness and they talk about it? And now the other partner is very careful to say, hey, I'm going to this place and I'll be back in about an hour. Don't worry. And reassure, right? So how we heal ourselves in relationships is often from a conflict that happens and how we deal with it. So a lot of relationships are places where we can heal, but that doesn't happen without conflict and without conversation. So the brain in itself, neuroscience tells us the brain likes easy. The brain likes relief. Healing is harder. It is much easier to get mad and make an accusation sometimes than it is to say, I'm feeling a certain way right now, and I need you to help me heal that. Our brain doesn't want to do that. That's why we scroll for 3 hours. That's why we have bad habits, is that our brain wants a quick and easy fix, and our brain doesn't lean into the difficult work of healing naturally. It wants to walk down the same old path. We also tend to want to avoid confrontation unless we feel like we're creating it ourselves, right? And the truth of it is that confrontations don't heal, but it's the feeling that's under it that needs to come out to heal. So what we're saying here is that in every relationship, there's a decision. And the decision is, do I keep it or lose it? And I think that that's a decision we have to think about all through the course of our lives, is how many times do we break up with people? How many times do we end friendships? And again, I want you to normalize that. That's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to all of us. But there are all those decisions that happen, and sometimes they're super easy and sometimes they're harder. But that's one decision. Do we keep it or lose it? And in most cases, I want you to fight to keep them, unless there's abuse, unless there's harm, right? And that's a conversation I need to have with all of you. If you have a relationship where there's abuse and harm, all of this goes out the window, because that's a whole separate issue that you need to get help for right away, because you cannot continue to be harmed and abused. We're talking about the little relationship dings that become bigger issues here for the most part. So, yes, there's a decision, keep the relationship or lose the relationship. But there's also another decision I want you to think about here. And this is the beginning of our catalyst, okay? The decision is actually, what priority does this relationship have to me? And you get to decide that. You are not a caged bird in someone's house. You have choices. You're not stuck in a place. So you can say, what priority is this relationship to me? And we can translate that to, how much time and emotional energy am I giving it? Okay. So this is not about necessarily choosing to have a person in your life sometimes. Our family, we didn't choose them. We didn't elect to be born and choose our parents. We didn't get a choice in that. But as you get older, you have a choice of how you prioritize it and work on it. So you are not a caged bird in the house of your family. You are a person who can choose to prioritize or not prioritize your family. If you have a sibling that is very, very good to you and one that stresses you out, we're not going to give them the same amount of priority and time. It's not healthy to do that. So priority says, I give it this much time and energy, and I'm willing to work on it. So it's interesting because you can think of this in terms of like a parent, right? Sometimes we have a parental relationship that's super close, or maybe the other parent is not super close. It's okay to prioritize and say, Mom and I have a great relationship, so Mom and I are going to spend a lot of time together. But being with Dad is not great for me. I'm not going to give him as much. And we have that weird sense of equality among friends and family, where we feel like if we have siblings, we have to spend the same amount of time with them. If we have parents, if we have friends, that we have to give equally to everyone. And I think that's false. I think you have so many precious hours and seconds in a day that we should choose to give them to the people that are good back to us and that we're willing to work on a relationship with. Your time is precious. It's interesting when we think about how we choose priority and how we choose who's close to us. I think about dating a lot, because dating is one of those areas where we're choosing right from the start. And a lot of people who are in a dating world will choose very specific characteristics that they want near to them. And some people will say, and I've heard plenty of people say, they have to be a certain height. They have to have certain income requirements, certain educational requirements. They have to look a certain way. And dating is very much about getting caught up in those things. And there's somebody I saw on Instagram. Her name's Tammy Haddon. Shout out to Tammy. She's brilliant. And she said that we identify superficial characteristics in the people that we date because we have not been loved well. Now go with me on this. That many of us have not had the things that we want in relationships. So we identify the things that we think would be good, the superficial things. At least he makes lots of money. At least she's beautiful. And because we have not been loved well, we will settle for those superficial things because we figure at least we'll get some part of what we want. And you can look at cliches and realize that some of the cliches are based on this. The rich person with the trophy wife, right, is he thinks nobody's ever going to love him for him. So at least he can have the most beautiful woman, right? And the woman who stays with the man who's terrible because he has lots of money. Well, he might not be great, but look at my life, right? Those cliches are really based on something very true. And what this person, Tammy, said was that when you haven't been loved well, you think being loved well is taking good enough. And good enough is, well, at least he pays the bills. And it's kind of dangerous because what about your heart? What about your mind? What about your soul? What about these other things? If somebody doesn't speak to that, it's not really a partnership, it's an arrangement. And those are okay as long as everybody knows that's what it is. They're not the best, but they work for people. So when you think about setting your priority of how do you pick who's first, right? We're not saying it's like first, second, third, fourth. It's not like that. And I think back to a story that when I met my partner now, that he talked about dating and that he had been with a woman who said right on the first date, just so you know, my children are the most important thing in my life. And he told me that story and I thought, well, yeah, of course your kids are important. But he said, but no, she assaulted me with it. Like, just so you know, right now, you're not going to be a priority. And he found it very disconcerting. And I thought about it because I have a child and I thought, oh gosh, yeah, like, how do you do that? How do you say my partner is the most important? No, my kid's the most important. Well, your kid's always the most important. But then what about my partner? And it's very crazy. And then you have to realize it ain't Sophie's choice. We never usually have to pick in healthy relationships between one person or another. And anybody that puts you in that situation is not participating in a healthy relationship. Now, you may have to do priority in certain times for certain people. If my son needed me, I would drop everything. There's nothing more important than that. But that's a priority that I've selected in my heart, right? But I never put him and say, oh, well, you're less important or more important than my partner. And I think we do that in our minds. We kind of already are probably doing it. We know what's important to us. But what I want you to realize is that you have to shift your priorities constantly because your life changes. And I'll tell you what I mean. There are natural points in your life where it's very clear what your priorities are. When you are born and you are a very young child, your most important priority is your parents. Your parents are your emotional connection. Then as you get older, you might connect to siblings. You might connect to friends. You might connect to teachers and mentors. Now, once you get into middle school, suddenly your friends are the priority. Then we start partnering and dating, and then our dating is our priority. How many of us got into fights at school with our friends because suddenly we had someone we were dating and we ignored them, right? Your priorities change all the time with who you select. And then when you get partnered later in life, perhaps you end up with children, and then the children become the priority. So you constantly have to look at priority as energy. Where is my energy going? And where in this stage of my life should it be going? If you have a newborn baby, you don't have a choice. Your priority is the needs of that baby. That's your first relationship priority above all else. There's no doubt. But then after 5 years, if you're still doing that, where's your partner? Where's the priority for them? This is why a lot of marriages end, and we've talked about this as the children get older, because we've made someone feel like they're not a priority anymore. So where are you in your life right now? What's the priority? And it doesn't have to be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have lots of priorities, but are you giving priority to people that don't really deserve it? Are you spending time with friends that are not giving back to you rather than work on your own partnership? Are you spending time with family out of obligation that makes you feel worse than better? And you have to constantly adjust this and assert sort of what fits for you. And Wayne Dyer, who was a big self-help guy back in the 70s and 80s and had some really smart things to say, he said, peace is the result of retraining your mind to process life as it is rather than as you think it should be. So we're surrounded by should be's, right? That we have these beliefs that our parents should be our best friends through our life, that our best friends from kindergarten will be our friends forever, and that the partner that we have right now is going to be our forever person, right? We have a lot of thinking it should be's. But what is it really? Maybe you have a parent that harms your self esteem every time you go near them. Maybe that's the reality. And no matter how much it should be different, it's not. So are you still going to go over to their house every day of the week? Maybe not, right? Maybe that's a harmful relationship. Maybe the priority needs to go down. Maybe instead of every day, you're going once a week, and instead you're spending time with people that feed your soul. Some people may never meet your needs, and you may still have a relationship with them. And sometimes we accept that. I know somebody that had the grumpiest grandparent in the world, and the grandparent was mean to them and cantankerous, and they still showed up. And it was one of those conversations of, why would you do that? They never meet your needs. They're never nice to you. And the person's answer was, because it's what I want to do. And that's okay. It wasn't really harming them. They were giving. So think of it this way. Your priority is about an investment, and it's an investment of time and emotional energy. Now, think about friends, partners, children, family. Where are you investing the most time? And is the investment equal to priority? Or are you being roped into things you don't want to do? Do you wish you had more of this? Do you wish you had less of this? And share that with that person. If you have a friend that you love to spend time with, but they live far away and you can't see them that often, share that. I wish we spent more time together, and maybe next year, instead of twice a year, we'll see each other 3 times a year. Make people know what you feel. If your parent insists that you come over every day and you go, I need less time here and more time in my life, right? Share with people what their priority is. It's easier with the people we want more with and harder with the people we want less than. And the way I say priority works is that look at the people that bring you honesty, look at the people that you have more joy with, and don't do this based on guilt. Do this based on the way that people make you feel and the way you make them feel and the way that relationship flows, not the obligation or the guilt. We have an obligation to family a lot of times, but you could be giving more than you actually need to give. And it's very, very individualized, and it's very, very personal. There are a lot of cultures that have different levels of obligation to family of origin and different levels of obligation to a partner. But do listen to your feelings again. Listen to the way you feel about things, and that'll tell you what's working and what's not. So we talked about priority as far as how you put people and how much you give people. But now we're going to talk about priorities. So we're going to talk about your personal priorities in your life and how that dictates your relationships. So people that are closest to us, the very closest people, share similar priorities with us. Think of it this way. If I said to you, what are the 10 most important things in your life? In order. You could personally write down 10 things, right? It could be family, partnership, children, job, whatever it is. It could be sex. It could be travel, whatever your priorities are as a human. And I do this in couples therapy. I'll say, write down your 10 priorities privately. And I would bet you the people that are the closest to you emotionally, that you feel the most connected to, probably have a relatively similar list. They don't have to be all the same, but the closest people to you share similar priorities. They share similar values sometimes, but priorities, meaning the things that they deem important. And I'll give you an example. If I have a couple that comes in and one partner's priority number 2 is sex, and the other person's priority number 10 is sex, I can look at that and go, Oh, this is why it's not happening. This is why they're not having sex. And this can cause problems, right? So your partner and you don't have to have the same top 10, but your top 5 should look kind of similar. And there should be some overlap. There should be some of the same things. And this is a really fun exercise to do with a partner and even somebody that you're kind of dating and feeling out is say, let's write down our top 10 life priorities and then let's share them. And most people would be afraid they're revealing something that's going to chase the person away. But guess what? If that person says number 1 is sex and number 10 is sex on yours, you're going to know, oh, this is going to be a mountain we might have to climb. And is that healthy and all that? So a lot of times our priorities might be completely different than our partners, which causes us frustration. So if my number 3 or number 4 priority is I need my environment to be calm, quiet, and organized. And that's nowhere on my partner's top 10 list. That means they don't value that or prioritize that like I do. And they might be sloppy and messy and cause us problems in our relationship. So talking about your own individual priorities is great for you because you can identify them. And then seeing what someone else's are gives you a great window into them. But I would bet you have family members that your top 10 could be wildly different. Does it mean that you're not going to be close and spend time together? No. But it might mean that those differences could make the relationship need a lot more work. So think about it. The closest people to you have a similar top 10, probably. So the more that you have disparate, the more that is not the same, is the more work that you have to do in a relationship. And it doesn't mean it's a closed door. It just means it might be a little harder. When they say opposites attract, this is the good side of that. People say opposites attract, and that's so great. Maybe opposites attract and they have to work a lot harder, but the relationship can be wonderful for what they bring to each other. But you do have to work a little harder. So I'm going to give you, just like in the last session, I'm going to give you 5 action items to help put all of this into motion in your life. And out of the 5, you could see one that resonates with you. You might want to try a little step from all 5. But the idea is that I want you to take this information and analyze and look around at your relationships. But then I want you actually using this as a catalyst to take action to improve them and to make them maybe shift toward healing rather than autopilot. Because if autopilot is not satisfying you, then let's work on healing, changing, improving. And what's interesting is we always think people are going to be resistant to when we initiate a new idea or a change. And what I have found, the more that I do that in my relationships, the more I am shocked that people find it refreshing or interesting. And I always talk about boundaries, right? And how it's so hard to set a boundary and to set a limit. And then when you do it, people sometimes fall right in because maybe they wanted it too. Maybe they, on their side of the relationship, aren't happy. So think about these 5 actions. So first is the one we talked about. Establish your priority. Establish who gets what from you. Time, energy, money, emotional connection. Who gets that from you? And you can even make yourself a little pie chart that says, this is how much I give, right? Because you might be giving more to a partner and less to your family and friends, or you might be giving too much to your friends and not enough to your partner. But I want you to play around with it and make sure that it resonates first with you. And then establishing the priority starts with you and then goes outward. So if you say, I don't think I'm spending enough time with my partner and I need to make them more of a priority, then go to your partner and say, this is what I feel. What do you think? And you might be surprised. They might say, yeah, that would really help me feel closer to you. Or no, I'm fine, right? But if you don't have that conversation, you don't know. So establish your priority and share it where it's appropriate and decide how you're going to feed it. So if you don't feel like you're spending enough time with your family, Decide how you would make that happen in reality. And I am a big fan of putting dates on the calendar. One of my friends reached out to me the other day and she was traveling and I was busy and we had to put a date on the calendar for 6 weeks from now. But we did it. And guess what? In 6 weeks, it's going to come and I'm going to end up being able to see her. So use the calendar, put dates on the calendar. And people, I know sometimes people think that's weird when I'm like, well, I can't come over this week, but how about October 30th? And they're like, okay, but I need to put it on my calendar. Please let me know. That's how you get it in. So look at all of those different obligations in your life. Every relationship has an obligation. Obligation isn't a bad word. It's just a truth. You only have so much time. That you have obligations with friends, with family, with maybe a partner or a dating time that you're putting in, and maybe your own children or other people close to you like coworkers. Look at all the relationships you have in your life and think about a big lump of time as your list of or your bunch of priority. How do you hand that out to everyone? And are you doing it in a way that represents what you want? And this doesn't mean that you're scheduling every minute of your time to take care of everybody. It just means that you're giving the people that you want the connection with the appropriate amount of time and not spending too much time on people that are probably not going to be it for you. Okay. So that's number one, establish your priority. Number two, be honest and clear about your expectations and your ability to meet needs. Now, I would say we're just going to call this to start with be honest, but being clear about your expectations and your ability to meet people's needs is really important. And what you're saying is, this is what I can do. Now, what does that actually mean, right? Is I have 4 siblings and I have a whole ton of nieces and nephews. And one of the things that they've gotten pretty good about is they know that I can't show up once a week, right? They know that when there's something that comes up, a birthday party or an event, they know I'll be there because they know that's what I can do, right? And I've expressed that. This is what I can give right now. Think about how important that conversation would be to people that tell you you don't give them enough. I never see you anymore. You're always so busy. You don't have time for me anymore. This is where your honesty has to come in. And you're not going to say, well, you're a smaller priority, so you're not going to get me much. But you are going to be honest and say, Mom, I have got so much going on with work right now that I'm probably only going to be able to see you once in October. But let's put it on the calendar, right? So putting people on the calendar is an important part of you being honest, because there's a part of me that says, if I put that friend on the calendar, I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm not talking to her until then, because I know I'm going to see her and I know she gets it because she's the same. So there's a bit of offloading here by being able to say, I'm going to give the right emotional energy to this person. But being honest about it with that person is a relief. Think about, we do it when we're dating people. You'll say, I'm available Friday night. And they go, okay, because they really want to see you. And they're glad to see you on Friday night. And then as you get rolling, you go, well, how about we spend a weekend together? And then you have to have a conversation. Well, that's kind of hard because I work on the weekends. And you can hold that priority usually pretty good in the beginning. So I'm asking you to keep doing that and make sure everybody knows what you can give and be honest about it. And we all have limits. Most of us have a lot going on. Number 3, be generous. One of the first things I talk about in couples therapy in the very beginning of the process, probably a couple sessions in, I talk about the concept of generosity. And generosity is something we look at like it's charity, right? I gave $1 to the homeless. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the idea of giving even when somebody's not giving to you in the same way. The idea of initiating giving. Have you ever given someone a present at just a random time because you saw it and you thought they would love it? And when you give it to them, how they light up and they go, Oh my God, Dolly Parton socks. I've never seen those before. And you thought of me? That's so cool, right? So being generous means that you're giving not because you have to or you're obligated. It means that you're giving because you want to make that person feel good. So think of the role of generosity in your relationship. When's the last time you just randomly did something for someone in all of your relationships because you wanted to make them feel good? Now, you might be a person who naturally does that all the time. I have people in my life that just they do that all the time. I think of my one of my brothers. He sees something and he gives it to you. Oh, I thought of you. He just gave me this birthday present with all of these really thoughtful things, right? And actually both my brothers did this year. But what was really fun about that is they were generous and they went to these different places and they found these things that reminded them of me. And it was so generous, not because they spent $1 million, but because they took the time and they gave it to me. So some people do that inherently and naturally, and some people have to work a lot harder at it. I think some of us have to just work at it. I know with me, I have to watch my generosity because I get so busy and caught up in my own path that I have to make sure that I'm giving to people. I have to make sure that I'm giving back to the people that give to me. And I make a conscious effort because I know the first thing to go when you're anxious sometimes is your generosity. And a lot of us are anxious. A lot of us are worried. A lot of us are trying to hold everything up. A lot of us are worried about money, right? And when we start to get all caught up in all that self noise, our ability to give to others goes down. And that's not that you're not a generous person or a good person, but anxiety can strip away our ability to think about what somebody else is feeling sometimes, or to think about it in the wrong way. They hate me. They're talking about me. They don't like me. I'm not good enough. All of that ugliness steals your generosity too, because you make yourself smaller. So the interesting thing is generosity makes you bigger by giving to someone else. So think of it in terms of a partnership. In a partnership, if you go home and you take out the trash and the trash was their job and you do it just because you know they had a hard day, that's generosity. The person comes home and goes, I don't have to do that. Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that, but thank you for doing it, right? Think about, I just talked to someone who one of her friends was having a problem cleaning up her house. She was very cluttered. And she said, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to sit there all day with her and I'm going to give her the whole day to help her with anything she needs. And I know this person. She's very busy. She doesn't have time to give up a whole day, but she's being so generous to go give to somebody that she really cares about who's in a tough spot. So think about your own generosity and are you giving it? And I don't want you to go, but they don't do it for me, because that's very easy because we're all in this boat. We're all speeding around, right? I want you to create a culture of generosity in your close relationships. And it's not just about giving a thing. It's about giving your time, your energy. It's sometimes about a text where you say, I am thinking about you right now, and I just hope that you have an awesome day. And I saw this thing that made me think of you. That's why I love meme culture, the idea that we're sending memes to people all the time. It's this really nice way of what we used to do with greeting cards and letters, right? Is instead of, I'm thinking of you, I'm sending you a card, it's this meme really made me think about you. Here you go. And that's a form of generosity too. You're giving and you're sharing. So give credit for their efforts when they do it and acknowledge it. And also don't keep score. You don't need to keep score and say, I did the trash the last 3 times and he did it the last few times. Now, there are times when keeping score can be important. If nobody ever does anything nice for you and you give them a present every year on their birthday, in that case, you need to keep score and look at yourself and see what has to change. Not that you need them to change necessarily. Maybe you do. Depends. But if you're keeping score because there's an imbalance, use that information. Again, feel your feeling. What is it telling you? But if you're keeping score because you want to have the leg up or you don't want them to have it, or be careful of that. Generosity comes free. It's like Oprah said once, and I thought it was really smart. She said that when she started to make money, a lot of people came out of the woodwork and asked her for money. And she started doing it as I'm going to lend you this money. And she realized nobody ever paid her back. And she got really bitter about it because they felt like she had the money. They didn't have to pay her back. And what she said is eventually when I gave as a gift. And I gave knowing that I wouldn't get it back. And it was easier for me as a person to sit with that than it was to sit with the anger that they didn't give it back to me. So, wow, ultimate generosity. This person needs money to pay their heating bill. I'm going to pay their heating bill and I'm going to do it as a gift. And that's sort of an extreme example of generosity, but it is what we're talking about. It's about giving without expectation that you get it back, and hoping that that person in turn eventually may give to you too. And what a beautiful thing if you have a relationship like that, where keeping score isn't even a thought. But you can be the one that starts that ball rolling with your own generosity. Your small little change there, look at your own generosity in your relationships. Not talking about giving gifts necessarily. I'm talking about giving time and attention. Attention is the biggest gift that you can give anyone, in my opinion. The gift of attention is a huge and powerful thing. And being generous means you give it when you can, and you give it. Number 4, listen as much as you talk. This one is a big one. I remember when I met my partner and he listened all the time and he'd be super quiet. And in my head, I'm going, oh, shut up. You're talking too much. And what does he think? You're crazy and weird. And he said, well, I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I should listen more than I talk. And I was like, that's brilliant. I'm going to steal that. So when you are with someone, give them your full attention. If you go out to lunch with your friend, put your phone down. Number 4, listen as much as you talk. That one is so simple, and it's an equation. This is one where I want you to keep score. Am I listening to this person as much as I am talking to them? And I think of the story of the lemon problem, where you have a couple that has a lemon and they only have one and they both want it. And the therapist says, well, we should just cut it in half and then you each get half the lemon. The truth of it was, one person wanted it to make lemonade. They wanted the juice, and the other person wanted the rind to bake with. They both could have shared the lemon, but instead they cut it in half. So that's a talking issue, right? I want this. Well, no, explain why you want it, and then let me listen to that, right? Listen as much as you talk. And number 5, the last one, be ready to admit your role in the challenges. We do not have to be right. And if you are a person who needs to be right, I want to send up a big alarm bell and say to you, being right will cost you your relationships, will make you the one that makes a relationship harmful if you have to be right. We don't want to be right. We want the right thing to happen, right? The fight is not you and another person. It's an issue in the middle that the two of you are trying to figure out. So be ready to admit your role in challenges. And your action step is, are you trying to be right? Are you trying to make the right thing happen? And this is all that self-protective stuff we talked about, right? Is that I'm going to be right so that you can't make me feel like I'm wrong. I'm going to keep my own security here. But don't be right at the expense of the relationship. So relationship harmony is foundational to your life. When your relationships are out of whack, you're going to feel out of whack. So I want you thinking about, what's the harmony that you want? What's the harmony you have? And where are the harmful things happening that you might need to back off of or deal with differently? And use these 5 things. Use these 5 things to evaluate those relationships and see if you can implement some of those things to maybe heal some of the things happening in the relationships. So speaking of relationships, next episode, we're talking about holidays and stress. And we're going to talk about stress around money, stress around family, and we're going to tell you that it's going to be different this year. So definitely tune in, listen, and watch to the next episode. And my sunshines, thank you for being here. Thank you for creating more harmony in your relationships and in the world. And I will see you next time. Bye.